But it was at that time, because you're about 19 or 20, I started to really question. So what is all this happiness business? All I know is suffering of having to work really hard and the stress of examinations. And I started to look at people who had already finished university. Were they happy yet? No, because as soon as you finish university, you've got to go to work. And when you're why do you go to work? You go to work to save up money. I saw some of my friends, a few years older than me, they'd finished university. They're working so hard to buy a car. And they thought, when I get enough money to buy a car, then I'll be happy. And once they got their car, then they'd have to buy a little apartment for themselves. Or they were looking for a wife, because most of my friends were men. And I looked at those men and they said, oh, when I find a wife and get married, then I'll be happy. That's a big joke, isn't it? You know, it's one of my favourite sayings of this guy. He'd just been married and he said, I didn't know what happiness was until I became married. And then it was too late. He said, before I got married, I used to hold the hand of my girlfriend out of love. After I got married, I used to hold her hand out of self-defense. But anyhow, once, okay, well, they are the third marriage joke. If love is blind, have you heard that saying, love is blind? Yeah, then marriage is an institution for the blind. Okay, enough about that. Actually, marriage can be very happy and very fulfilling. Those are just jokes. But anyway, I saw some of the people who are married, and they weren't happy yet. So all this thing about when I find my partner in life, then I'll be happy. I thought, there's something wrong with that. Because when you got married, the next thing you need to do, you've got to work hard to find a house or a place to live. And it's really expensive. And sometimes you have to take on a second job and save very hard. But a lot of people think that when I bought my house, or after I bought my house, when I paid off my bank debt, then I'll be happy. And in the meantime, you have kids. And as soon as you have kids, the first couple of months or year is sort of okay. But then after a while you think, okay, when my kids grow up and leave home, then I'll be free, then I can be happy. But as soon as the kids leave home, you're still not happy yet, because you're getting close to retirement. You're getting old. And many people think that when I retire, then I can be happy. But by the time you get close to retirement, that is the time when people start going to temples and churches. And you know why they go to temples and churches when they're old? Because they think, if I go to church or make enough good karma, that when I die, then I'll be happy. And I noticed that most of my life, and most of people's life, are always thinking that when I get this, then I'll be happy. That when I, win the lottery, or when I get rid of my husband, and when I get enlightened, then I'll be happy. And I realized that you were missing a lot of the point there. And you realize that that actually was the meaning of suffering. Always thinking that when you get something else, then you'll be happy. It's called craving. It's called desire. And you notice what the Buddha said, that every time you have a craving, every time you want something, then you are separated from what you desire. And there is a tension there. I want, I haven't got yet. That is called suffering. It means you have to work hard. It means you have to struggle. It means you're not content. You're not happy where you are. And this is what the Buddha called suffering. That word suffering needs to be understood, because when the Buddha said that everything is suffering, I got quite depressed. So it's wonderful when I went to see some monks who were supposed to be enlightened, and I was actually surprised. These guys were happy. So how can you be happy when everything is suffering? And the reason is because, yeah, there is suffering, but there's also an end of suffering as well. There's a freedom from suffering. And I was very happy to see joyful monks, because I wanted some proof. I was a scientist. And so I say, if such a thing as Nibbana exists, I want to see it. I want to see some happy and peaceful monks. And it was wonderful actually to live with a monk like an Ajahn Brahm, to see he was genuinely happy, that there was an end of suffering, and you could actually see that. And I looked at Ajahn Brahm and see how he worked, and I see how he behaved. There was a man who didn't want anything, who was happy no matter what happened, but also who worked very hard, teaching and helping other people. And it taught me exactly what this suffering truly is, and the end of suffering. The people who you have seen in your life who've got the very least suffering, who are they? Are they the people who are very beautiful and appear on the glossy magazine covers? Are they the happy, beautiful people? Someone told me the other day that to get on a glossy magazine cover, you have to have your photograph airbrushed 40 times. So if you see any of these supermodels, in real life, they've all got pimples. They're not all like you'd expect, which is one of the problems. Now sometimes you've got to be careful here, because what we say is beauty is a lot of that is just what we call conditioning. I was saying this morning, if you look at the pictures of, say, beautiful women or handsome men 20 years ago, they're not that beautiful after all. 40 years ago, and they're really quite ordinary. And 100 years ago, actually they're ugly. So a lot of what we call as beauty is completely conditioned. We're taught what beauty is. And one of the problems is, especially with women, it's such a hard thing trying to be beautiful. I remember going to Melbourne to give a series of talks a few years ago, and it was the winter time. And the winter in Melbourne is very, very cold. Unfortunately, the fashion at that time was to have these like high jumpers and low slung jeans. So it had this whole band of exposed flesh. And I saw a few of these girls walking down the road with their midriff all exposed. And it was going blue. It was so cold. What people had to do for fashion, oh, it was so much suffering. Sometimes I wonder, what do we do that for? Oh, goodness. So the point of this is that sometimes we wonder, sort of, how can we really get happiness in this world, and why is there so much suffering? And a lot of times it's the suffering, the Buddha said, is because of this desire and craving. Think that when I get this, then I'll be happy. When I change this, then things will be different. When I change my job, change my partner, change the country where I live, whatever it is you're changing, you think that then you'll be happy. And that's where I come to that story. I've already said it, I think, a couple of days ago, but I repeat it here because I'm going to expand upon it. And it's a story of those two Thai girls who were sisters. And one of them, they both came for counselling. I keep on saying that one of the reasons why people come for counselling to monks is because we're cheap. Because we don't charge. And that's very attractive. We undercut the market. But also very good as well. So, they came to me for counselling, and what was your trouble, madam, to the First Lady? And her trouble was she had a husband who was having a hard time. Having a lot of difficulty, a lot of trouble, and she was actually wondering whether she should get divorced and try again. Whether, they were suitable, compatible. So I said, look, when you're married to someone else, sure it can be suffering, but it can be a lot of fulfillment as well. So you should really put more energy and effort, and told her a few tips actually to make her marriage work. So when I say those jokes earlier, it's not that I'm against marriage, I was just having a bit of fun and games, because again, some of the books and talks which I've given actually saved many marriages and kept people together and understand how they can relate better to each other. There's simple things like, the old chicken and duck story, just don't argue over stupid things, simple things. It's much better to have your priorities right. If you're in a marriage, your love together is more important than being right. So remember why you married that person. And make that person important in your eyes. What happens very often in a marriage is we think our partner, they take us for granted, we're not important to them anymore, we feel that, and we want to talk to them, they're not listening. They always say lack of communication. So it's not that hard to get the marriage back on track. When I tell people the story of it's another story from the book, you've heard it many times before, I'll say it in brief. The story of the Emperor's 3 questions. Who is the most important? No, what's the most? When is the most important time? No. Who is the most important person? The one you're with, yeah. It's not yourself, it's not someone else, it's the one you're with. And the most important thing to do? To care, yeah. The Emperor's 3 questions. If you can always practice that with your partner, now is the most important time. The one you're with, that's your partner. They are the most important person in the world in this moment. And the most important thing to do is to care. Then you have the formula, very simple, for a very successful and intimate marriage. If the other person is doing the same to you, when you're in front of them, when you're talking, when you're together, you realize that in this moment you are the most important person in the world to your partner. That's called love. That's called togetherness. They're there and you're there. They're valuing you and you're valuing them. And then the relationship just grows from that. You don't need more information than that. To care, how does care happen? Or what actually, how is that expressed? Who knows? Care happens in many different ways. But when you have that motive, you're coming from the right place, it always works incredibly well. So remember those Emperor's 3 questions when you are married. Now is the most important time. Doesn't matter how long you've been married. Now is the most important time to tell your partner how much you love them and how much you appreciate them and how much you care for them. If you've done something wrong and said a stupid thing, now is the most important time to say sorry. Sorry just costs so little, but you get so much back in return. And care. And that's all a woman or a man wants from a marriage. To be given importance and to know the other person cares for them. So it's very easy to save marriages. And look at me, I'm a monk, I've never been married. And I know all about it. But in life we think, this lady, I gave her that sort of advice. And then I turned to her sister, what's your problem, madam? And her problem was that she hadn't got a husband and she wanted one desperately. All of you girls who are not married yet, who feel you're suffering because you can't find a partner in life, go and talk to a woman who has got a husband. Oh, you young men are looking for a partner. Go and look to a man who's married. Oh, you men who are married and thinking you want to be single again, go and ask a single man. What's happening here? I told that lady who was single, looking for a husband. No, the old joker said, why don't you swap husbands? Because you've got a husband you don't want. She wants one. Easy solution. You're sisters anyway. You're supposed to share. We can't share that much. And anyhow, I said, and this is the main part of the story, why I'm bringing it up now. I told the lady who had a husband, you have husband suffering. And it's the same. Doesn't matter what man that is. They're slightly different, but they're basically the same models. So some have got a few extras. Like you get a car, you get a few extras, but it's not that much. The engine's the same. So you've got husband suffering. And you, lady, your sister, have got single woman suffering. If you get rid of your husband, you won't have husband suffering anymore. You will have single woman suffering. And you, single woman, if you get a husband, a partner in life, you won't have single woman suffering anymore. You will have husband suffering. And so you find that just trying to change the situation you're in is not overcoming suffering. It's just exchanging one form of suffering for another. When I was at school, I thought when I left school and go to university, then I'll be happy. All I was doing was changing school suffering for university suffering. And when you say, I'm going to finish university, it's finished now. Sure, you're letting go of university suffering. Now you have to have work suffering. When you go to work and you think you're going to retire, when you retire, you're still not happy yet. You get retirement suffering. When I was very young, you really couldn't wait to get old and have your freedom. When I was old, I realized what I'd wasted being young. And young, you were carefree, no responsibilities. When you have young, you have young person suffering. When you're middle-aged, you have middle-aged person suffering. When you're old, you have old suffering. The point is, you're not getting rid of suffering by changing the situation you're in. So, are you happy, or do you want something else? What do you aspire to? What are your dreams in life? What do you really want in life? Sometimes people want to be rich. If you're rich, you don't get rid of suffering. You have rich person suffering. And I know this because as a monk, you just go to all levels of society. Look about when I met the Queen in March. The Queen Elizabeth. I told that story a few days ago. But I felt so sorry for Queen Elizabeth. I actually found out why she wears these big hats. You know why? She always wears these long, big-rimmed hats. Because one of the first ceremonies we went to was an interfaith service at St Andrew's Cathedral in Sydney. It was a big Anglican cathedral. And so I was saying a few words there. That was part of my reason for being there. So they put me up in the choir up the front. And obviously, the Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip and, that's right, the Prince Edward was there as well. They were all in the front row with John Howard and all these other dignitaries. And when I went up to give my speech, it was only a short speech. Actually, I could see her beforehand. I had direct view to her. And I saw her every now and again put her head down. And because of the long-brimmed hat, you could not see her eyes. But every now and again, I saw her jerk her head up very quickly. She was sleeping. She was nodding off. She was having a snooze. And because she had the long-rimmed hat, you couldn't see it. So that's actually why the Queen wears a long-rimmed hat. So she can have a nap whenever she wants and no one knows. Except sneaky monks who are always peering. So now, one day, you're sort of, with Queen Elizabeth. Actually, with Prince Edward. Because at a reception afterwards, we all went to this reception at John Howard's house. And because it's interesting, when you go to these events, there's always the head person. So obviously Queen Elizabeth was, the number one attraction there. So everyone was crowding around her. So you got Prince Edward was actually standing alone. No one was talking to him because I'm a very compassionate monk. I decided to go and have a chat with him. And everyone of you knows Prince Edward. He can only be in his 30s or something, but he's actually losing a lot of hair in the middle. So I went up to him and said, if you lose any more hair, you can become a Buddhist monk in my monastery. I am very irreverent. So sometimes you're hanging out with royalty, and the next moment you're working with a bricklayer. So as a monk, you actually straddle all levels of society. You go through doors where other people just can't go through. But every now and again you see these very, very rich people. People have got so much money. And I remember this one occasion I had to do a house blessing in Perth for this very, very wealthy lady. And when I went to her house, for the morning meal, we sat down there. They gave us a cup of tea, first of all, while the meal was being finished. And I asked to go to the toilet. She had to draw me a map of how to negotiate all these rooms and ante-rooms in a mansion to get to the toilet. No exaggeration, she drew a little map, this way, that way, that way. And afterwards, I was just chatting to her and asked her, how many people live here? She said, only me. This poor woman had this huge mansion, had so much wealth, but was incredibly lonely. She had no one to share her evenings with, no one to share her joys and her pain with. She was completely alone. And I asked her why. And she said, as far as her relatives are concerned, she's afraid they may ask her for some money. And any other friends, you don't know whether they're a friend because they like her or because they just want money. It's rich person's suffering. Whenever even they see a monk, they think, oh my goodness, they're going to ask for a donation for their retreat center. There was a time in the stories, in the time of the Buddha, that some of the monks were asking for so much that in this town, whenever they saw brown cows in the distance, they thought they were monks and they went to hide. They closed their doors and went, the monks are coming, you can ask us for something. That's called rich person suffering. Rich people are very lonely because sometimes they can't trust their friends and relations. So, if you want to be rich and think that's going to be happiness, it's not. Sometimes I saw this article in a newspaper, this fellow who was, I think he was in the United States, he'd won the biggest lottery prize ever in history. Somewhere in the Midwest of the United States. I don't know how many hundreds of millions of US dollars. And he was just been arrested and taken to jail. Before he'd been such a happy, easygoing man. Now he got rich. He just went crazy. So rich. He lost his idea of what's right and what's wrong. And he'd been put in jail for the rest of his life. And sometimes there's many, many cases like that. So sometimes, what do you want? To be happy? And why is there so much suffering in life? It's because we don't realize what's important, what's really necessary for happiness in life. Every time when I am privileged to hold a funeral service for Buddhists, and I do these funeral services sometimes twice a week, because people are always dying, and sometimes, they die at the most inconvenient times, which is why when I'm on retreat, I tell all my disciples, please don't die now. But some of them are so stubborn, they don't follow what I say. Disciples are not like they used to be in the old days. They'd always follow instructions. But whenever I do a funeral, have you ever noticed this? In the West, they have this tradition of eulogies, where relations or someone stands up and they say about the life of the person who's just died. And whenever I've listened to these eulogies, never once have I heard someone say how much money this person had in the bank, or how big their house was, or what type of car they had. When a person dies, what we remember is just how kind they were, how selfless they were, how generous they were. And I've even been to Christian funerals, and it's the same. What we're saying here is, at a person's death, only then, it seems, we remember what's truly important in life. The kindness, the generosity, the friendliness, the service to the community. Those things are what really count, because that is what makes for happiness. So really what we should be aspiring towards is not to be the richest person in Kuala Lumpur, but to be the kindest. Not to have the biggest house, but to have the biggest heart. Not to be the person who is the most aggressive goal-getter, but to be the one who has the most friends, who's the most loving, who gives the most service. Not the one who gets the most, but the one who gives the most. Those are the secrets of ending suffering. But sometimes things go wrong. We think they go wrong. Sometimes people die tragically. Sometimes you lose your job. Sometimes you're meditating and eating health food and drinking ginseng tea every morning, and you find you get cancer. It's unfair, we think. I did all the right things. What have I done wrong? And sometimes this is a lot of suffering for people when things apparently go wrong. Recently we had like tsunamis, we had earthquakes, we have cyclones. And when these come to our communities, they can create a lot of suffering. Why me, or why them? Why did this happen? Remember this key story when this man came to see my teacher Ajahn Chah, and he had been wounded in a battle because he'd been conscripted into the Thai army. He was a soldier. And he'd been shot and quite severely wounded. You know, he survived. It wasn't life-threatening, but he was partially disabled. And he came to complain to Ajahn Chah. He said, why me? Why did this happen? What sort of karma did I do that I took a bullet? And Ajahn Chah looked at him and said, are you stupid? Are you dumb? What do you mean asking that question? You're a soldier. What do you think happens to soldiers? No, you shoot bullets at other people. What do you expect? Other people are going to shoot bullets at you. And some of those bullets are going to hit. It's par for the course. It's to be expected. Whenever you join an army, you should read the small print. You're expected to be liable to take a bullet and be wounded. The karma which caused that to happen is joining the army. That's why it happened. And then he expanded upon that. He said some people, they die young. Sometimes they die of a heart attack. Sometimes they die of a car crash. Sometimes they die of a lightning strike. Sometimes they die in a tsunami. Or sometimes they just drop down dead with heart attack even when they're young. You say, why does that happen? Didn't you read the small print before you took birth in this human realm? Didn't you look at the contract before you came here? It was there in the small print. You can die at any time from any cause. That's being a human being. So, when you understand the rules of the game, why do people die in tsunamis? It's because they're born. Because they're a human being. That's why you can get a cancer. That's why you can die. That's why a tsunami can happen. You don't know. But what you do know is a human being, the karma of being born in this human realm is that you can die at any time. Sometimes, so I do a quick calculation. I look at the people. How many people on this Dharma enrichment camp today? Up and down? 200 people. Okay, the quick calculation means that by this time next year, 4 of you will be dead, according to statistics. Which 4 will it be? And don't just look at the old people. That's true. That's statistics. 4 of you will be gone by next year. Ah. Now the point is, this is just the meaning of life. The reason why we suffer is because we have unrealistic expectations. We ask something of life which it will never give us. We ask something of our husband, our wife, our parents and our children, which they can never supply. The secret of overcoming suffering is just realizing the truth of life, understanding that we can't get all these unrealistic expectations. We make our desires realistic. We get real. Husbands are like this. Wives are like that. Children are like that. They will not all become doctors and engineers and marry the person we like them to marry. They won't all live next door so we can mother them for the rest of their life. Some of them will go to England, some of them will go to the US, and some of them will go to places we'd rather them not go, but they'll go there. That's life. It's unrealistic expectations is what causes suffering. So when we learn things like Buddhism, we make our expectations more realistic. We understand the meaning of life, what it can give us and what it can't give us, and we realize that the best thing which we can do is to care, to be kind, to be generous. That's the best we can do. We can't expect to be appreciated for our generosity. We have to give expecting nothing back in return. We realize that happiness does not lie in some mystical place in the future. Anyone who thinks that, okay, when you die, then you'll be happy, it's just like thinking, oh, when I get married, then I'll be happy. If you get to heaven, it will disappoint you. Where you see friends, sometimes you wonder, those people are like cats. Are you allowed to have a cat up in heaven? If you're allowed to have a cat, then what do the cats eat? It's not much of a heaven for the mice. Sometimes, what will happen if you've been married several times? Will your first wife, your second wife, and your third wife also be up there with you? That'll make things complicated. What about your food? Those of you who aren't vegetarians, if you like, say steaks, you have to have a few cows up there being killed. That's not very nice for the cows. There was this story once about this man who went up to heaven, and up in heaven he had to wear these white clothes. You know that you've seen like in the movies or pictures, these like long white flowing robes. And when they gave him something to eat, it was this ambrosia. That's what they're supposed to eat in heaven, just ambrosia. And the music he had to hear was this harp music. You know the harp music? And after a few weeks, he was sick of harp music because he liked rock. And this ambrosia, he was just fed up with that. He wants something interesting, like some durian or some noodles or something. And, instead of seeing all these people in white clothes, can't we have some fashion up here? It was much better back in the world, in this heaven place. And so he went up to one of the angels to complain. He said, can't we liven things up a bit up in heaven? I've worked so hard for this reward. Can't I get something better? Can't we have some decent rock bands up here? And he said, no, this is tradition. It's always been this way. And then that night he had a vision. He had a vision of hell. And down there in hell, he had all these really beautiful girls, really dressed up in the most modern fashion. And they had these amazing rock bands. Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin. Oh, they were just rocking all night. And the food in there. Now, you think you've had delicious durian in Penang. That's nothing like he saw down in there in hell. And the noodles, there were just plates of them, and they were just so aromatic. You couldn't get noodles like that, even in the best restaurant in Singapore. And so the following morning, I went up to the angels. Look, I had this vision of hell. And it's a beautiful, even down there they have good rock bands. Even down there you can have nice food and beautiful women. So can't we have that up here? And the angel said, look, I told you yesterday, no. Why have they got eating in hell? I don't know, but if you want to go down there, go. I said, okay, I'll go down there. And he went down to hell, and as soon as he went down to hell, there was no rock bands. There was no nice food or beautiful women. He just got taken by these really ugly demons with these horns and long teeth and thrown into this pot of boiling oil and poked with his sharp sticks. And he started to complain. He said, look, that's not what my vision said. In my vision, there was these beautiful women and nice rock bands and nice food and beautiful jewelry. And as these demons were poking him, he said, oh, yeah, that was our advertising campaign. That's what marketing is like, isn't it? It's not truthful, it's all lies. And people get sucked in. That's the marketing of craving. Craving says that once I get this, then I'll be happy. Once I sort out my husband and take him to Ajahn Brahm and make Ajahn Brahm make him this nice, soft, beautiful guy. He always does what he's told. Or bring my children to the Dhamma school here in BGF, because the Dhamma school will turn my child into something who always says nice things to his parents and does what they're told and does well at school. All of our craving is like a marketing. And sometimes we miss the point that our real happiness is right here, right now, with people we are with. I'll finish off this part with one of the secrets to the ending of craving. It's one of the secrets of happiness. And this was, again, a story from the book. It's a beautiful story. That's why I don't mind repeating this many, many times, because it's very deep. It's the story of that monk who went to prison to teach prisoners. And after going many weeks, the prisoners invited him to stay behind for tea. And they started asking him about what it's like in a forest monastery. How you have to get up early at 4 o'clock. How you have to work very hard. How there's no sex, no sport, there's no television, there's no radio, there's no music. That we have to meditate all day, sleep on the floor, eat one meal a day, all in the same bowl, not getting what we want. And actually, the prisoners were so surprised, because in prison it's much easier than in a forest monastery. Physically, it's more comfortable going to jail than being a monk. That's why if I ever do anything wrong and go to jail, for me a jail will be like a holiday camp, like a resort, compared to some of the monasteries I've been in. And, can you not hear? Okay, I'll try a bit. Is that better? Okay. So, we were comparing the prison with the monastery. And the monastery was more ascetic, more austere, and physically harder to endure than a prison. And so one of the prisoners, out of misplaced compassion for their monk friend who they got to love, not thinking what they were saying, was saying, that's so terrible, so hard in your monastery. Why didn't you come in here and stay with us instead? They invited him into jail. And only then, when he realized what he was saying, did he burst out laughing. But the point of that story was why my monastery has got 21 monks. It's only supposed to have 20 huts, but we've got an extra one there. And another one is going to be ordaining before the range retreat started. I don't know where I'm going to put them. And there's a whole list, a waiting list of people wanting to join. Why is there a waiting list of people trying to join a monastery? And it's so ascetic and hard. But there's a waiting list of people trying to leave prison. They can't get out soon enough. Why do people want to get out of jail? Why do so many people want to become monks, even though it's such a hard, physical, demanding life? The point is, the people who are in a monastery want to be there. It's like choice, but I'm putting it, they want to be there. In a prison, you don't want to be there. That is the main difference. And from that, I realized that life has many prisons for you. Any place you don't want to be is your prison. It's suffering. If you are in a marriage and you don't want to be there, if you're in a job and you don't want to be there, if you're the vice president of the BGF and you don't want to be there, then your job is a prison for you. If you're a monk and you'd rather be somewhere else, then being a monk is a prison for you. If you're sick with a cancer, if you're dying, and you don't want to be sick, then your body becomes a prison for you. And this is how you feel. Any place you don't want to be is your prison. The Buddha understood that, and he talked about how to escape from prison. How do you escape from the prisons of life? You don't need to change your job, to change your partner, to change your body to being healthy again. That is not how you escape from prison. As I said earlier, if you change your partner for another one, you're just going from one prison to another prison. The only way you escape from prisons is changing your attitude from not wanting to be here to wanting to be here. When you want to be here, you're ending craving. You're happy to be here. You learn contentment. This is good enough. Take it from me, who's seen many husbands and wives in counseling. Your husband is good enough. It might surprise you, but that's as good as it gets. If you try and change your model, you'll probably get a worse one. Your wife, you think that the girl in the office is better, is prettier, or is better in bed. You'll find, no, your wife is good enough. In fact, she's probably better, but sometimes you don't appreciate it. If you want to be here, and this is good enough, there you'll find contentment, the secret of the end of suffering. Your job, if you think, oh, if I could only get that promotion, then I'll be happy. Think about it. If you get that promotion with more responsibility, you'll have to work even harder. You'll get more stress. Now I should stop for any questions. Yeah, we've got one from the back. Anybody upstairs who wants to ask a question, please put it on pieces of paper and we'll bring it down here and I will answer it. And I expect more profound questions from upstairs in the higher realms than these poor beings stuck down here in the lower realms. So we've got one question, then one question from over here. Yes?
Ajahn Brahm.
Yeah. One there and one there, yeah. He got there first.
Question. The first one relates to craving or deeply suffering. What does a lay person like me need to do to internalize the letting go of craving?
What you need to do to understand why we should let go of craving.
So I can understand what are the triggers that I can internalize, really accentuate the process of letting go.
Okay, what you should do is to understand the meaning of happiness. Because happiness is the carrot which allows you to lessen craving. Because sometimes you think, the more I want, the more I want, the more I want, the more unhappy I am. And you have times in your life, the inspiring, meaningful, beautiful, the most peaceful and happiest times in your life. What were they? Were they times when you were craving or the result of craving? Or were they the result of letting go of craving? Of just being at peace? Of appreciating your family, your friends' life for what it is, not for what it can give you, but just for what it is. After a while, it's awakening, it's wisdom, it's the clearing of ignorance. When we see what happiness truly is, then craving disappears. You see that craving, it promises something, but it doesn't give it. Letting go, being at peace, being kind, that gives you all the happiness. It's what happened to me when I started meditating. The happiest times of my life was when I was at peace. And I wasn't a rich man, I wasn't a beautiful man, I was intelligent, but the most happiest of times was not after I passed my exams. It was just sitting in the garden, just enjoying the flowers. The peaceful times when you were satisfied. You don't need money for that. So when you understand what happiness is, then craving is seen as an obstacle to happiness. You got second question then? Can you do two questions then yourself here? Oh, okay, now maybe you can wait for a minute, then ladies first, and then you next.
Ajahn Brahm, I heard that the new way of introducing Buddhism is to find more happiness and say thank something.
That's actually very true, that one of my monks was looking through some very old talks which I gave about 20 years ago. And I started doing this about 20 years ago, just rearranging the Four Noble Truths. Because whenever a person hears Buddhism for the first time, sometimes it's just what people talk about. Four Noble Truths, suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the way leading to the end of suffering. And I just noticed that actually that monks were happy people, and people who understood Buddhism were happier than others. So it made me think here that we were missing something. And certainly the key was the Buddha saying that Nibbanang Paramang Sukhang. Nibbana is the ultimate, the highest, the supreme happiness. So that made a lot of things click together. So the third noble truth was the supreme happiness. And all of you people, if you want to be happy and the supreme happiness is on offer, then you've come to the right place. Sometimes I don't like denigrating other religions, but in Christianity a much lower happiness is on offer, just heaven. In Buddhism we're way above that. This is the supreme happiness, the ultimate. You can't go beyond that. So now we have that goal of Buddhism, the ultimate happiness. You understand what you're doing. The closer you are to that goal, the happier you should be. And so it's a great way of teaching, but it's also accurate, it's meaningful. But every now and again, someone comes up to me and said, that's a beautiful, inspiring teaching, but it's not real. I've just lost my husband. My kid has been stillborn. Or I've got a kid who's brain damaged. I've lost my job. I've got cancer. I'm in constant pain. Where's all this happiness business? What I have to tell people is that the way to happiness is not by changing the world. The world is like this. People die at any time. This is the realistic expectation of the world. You do get cancers. Kids die. I gave this simile in my book about this monk who was in this storm. He was staying in this hut of branches and twigs, and in the early morning he survived. If any branch or tree hit his hut, he would have been smashed to bits. There was no protection. But in the morning he went outside to see the damage in the forest where he lived. But what he noticed was not the trees which had been blown over by the storm. What he noticed was the leaves which were lying dead on the forest floor. You would have expected that most of the leaves which had been torn off by the heavy wind would have been the old brown leaves which have lived their life on the twigs and branches. And sure enough, most of the leaves on the floor were the old brown ones. But nevertheless, there were a few green leaves there as well, and some yellow ones as well. And amongst the green ones there were some fresh green leaves. There were the sprouts from the day before, only just arisen from the twig. They too had been torn off by the wind and lay dead on the floor. He looked up to see what leaves were left on the twigs. You would probably expect that most of the leaves left on the trees after the storm were the young green leaves, the healthy ones. Sure enough, that was right. But amongst those green leaves, there were still some yellow leaves. And even though fresh green leaves had been torn off and laid dead on the ground, there were still some old curly brown leaves still clinging on to life, though fresh green leaves had been torn off. And he realized what we call Dhamma, nature. When the storms of death or injury come through our community, they usually do take the old brown leaves, the old and the weak, but not always. Sometimes they take the young children as well. Young green leaves just sprouted the day before. What he realized is that there's nothing gone wrong. You can't blame the wind. It's not some divine being's malice that takes away young children. He said, this is life. This is truth. This is the real world. We can't change that real world. What we can do is change the way we look at it. We change our attitude. To become enlightened, you don't change the world. You change your attitude towards the world. You become realistic, compassionate, at ease. Attitude. People want to try and change the world. We should really try and change our attitude. Change our mind. That's the way to enlightenment. And that's making happiness, and more happiness. And that's a great marketing, but it's also accurate and truthful. Yeah, what was your second? Does that answer the question, sort of? Was that answering your question? Okay. Yes, now the second part. And then we go on to the questions from the high realms.
Rich lady follower in birth. Was there any transformation in her after you had advised her? And what sort of advice did you give her, other than perhaps telling her, let go. But I faced a situation where I had some loved ones who are well off, but then very tight business.
Yeah.
Do I mind my own business? And in which case I feel that I'm too self-centered, or do I share with them what my understanding of what letting go is?
Okay, with that lady, that she wasn't listening to me at all, so I don't think I made much of an impression at all.
You just let it go.
You had to let it go, because I do that to give. I don't do that to get disciples. In fact, for the last, 20 years, I've been trying to get rid of you lot. I've been trying to make you all enlightened, independent, so you don't need to come again. I used to be a school teacher. When I was a school teacher, you wanted to try and get people to pass the exam so I don't need to come to school again. I'm a terrible teacher. Some people keep coming back year after year after year after year. If I was a school teacher, I would get the sack. So you're teaching not to get disciples, but trying to free them. That's the whole point of teaching. Liberating. So you never need to go to a Buddhist center again. You're enlightened, you're free. In a hospital, you're trying to get rid of the patients. This is like a hospital for the mind. When people don't come again, they're either completely stupid and fed up with me, or they're enlightened. And I look up on the bright side, they must be like. But yeah, if it's actually that I saw an article in the, again I like these psychology journals from the United States. They found the optimum salary is $50,000 a year. They say if you get more than that, it doesn't help you at all. It doesn't increase your happiness. Now, 60, 100,000, it's no use at all. The optimum salary as far as happiness goes, well-being, good relationships, enough to get by is 50,000. As soon as I heard that, I read that out at our city centre and said, if 50,000 is the optimum salary, I have a special offer for people who are earning more than that. You can put the difference in our donation box. And thereby you'll be happier. What more can you get? They didn't buy it. It was a great line, but they didn't believe it. This is like rich people. Sometimes they just can't get in there. But yeah, sometimes the best thing to do with anybody, rich or poor, stubborn or not, Buddhist or Christian, is actually not to push so hard. Let them come to you. If they see you're a peaceful, happy, successful person, when it's the right time, they'll come and ask you, what is this Buddhism anyway? Why are you so happy? Why are you so at peace? And when they come and ask you, they're open, and then they'll listen. But if you try and teach them when they're not open, you're wasting your breath. Okay, we have a couple of questions asked, thought this. I mean, this is actually from the higher realms. What can you expect? But the first question, what is the word enlightenment means? Enlightenment. It's two words, like light means that you can see clearly, so that all the light's going in the mind, so you can actually understand what's going on. So it's seeing things clearly the way they truly are. But it's also light means not heavy anymore. So you're just so light, you just float through life. Things happen. People call you a pig, and you just float through it. They call you the greatest teacher they've ever known on earth. You just float through it. So you're just so light, nothing wears you down. Whenever you go to the airport, you don't have all these heavy suitcases. You just float through customs. That's what enlightenment means. It lightens your burden. So are you heavy or are you light? The more you're worried about things, the heavier you are. That's why when some people meditate, they go like this. They've got so much going on in their head. They're just so heavy. Some people are so much going in their head, they can't get up in the morning. They try and get their head up, it's too heavy. So a light person is someone who's got a spring in their step. Someone who's light-hearted, who skips through life. Cancers, deaths, depressions, losing the money in the stock market, gaining the money in the stock market, skipping through, light-hearted, being enlightened. So, in the Buddhist Gem Fellowship, you can lighten your wallet. Donation box outside. And the second part of the question, if we should be content of everything, then it doesn't mean we do not need to work hard and no need to set goals in our life. No need to chase for our dreams in life. It's okay to have dreams and goals, but have the right ones. The sensible ones. Sometimes some people aim to be the richest person in the cemetery. A crazy thing to do. They work so hard that they die young. So how make it the right goal? What is really worthy in life? And sometimes you have to not just listen to the adverts or the movies. It's not like to be like Bruce Willis and the toughest dude in the whole of KL. It's not like to be like David Beckham and just be the best soccer player in the whole of the world. It's not like to be like Angelina Jolie and the sexiest girl in the Buddhist Gem Fellowship. It's not like to be like, Bill Gates and the wealthiest person in the world, what do people aspire towards? You know who my hero is? The one I aspire towards? Yes. The Buddha. So have a hero worship, but worship someone who's worthy of worship. Worship, aspire to something which is really worth aspiring towards. And what is the highest goal other than the highest happiness? So set goal. Set goal, happiness. That's what I want in life. Contentment. If you want praise of other people, say, I want the praise not now, I want people to praise me when I die. When I die, to think there was a guy, there was a girl who was such a wonderful friend, who really helped me and served me and helped society, who really cared and did so much for other people. Make that your goal. So at the end of the life, people respect you and give you the highest praise. Someone who was wise, kind, generous, who served. Isn't that wonderful? So it's okay to have goals. Make them the high goals, the goals which don't create suffering. The goals of giving, letting go, helping, serving, love, forgiving. Isn't it great that you will die having no enemies, having forgiven everybody who hurt you or cheated you? Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing to do? To say that, yeah, people have cheated me, they've hurt me, they've abused me, but I've forgiven them all. And if you've hurt or cheated other people or done the wrong thing, as you do, we make mistakes, to seek their forgiveness before you die too. Dear husband, I shouldn't have said that. Years ago, I don't know if you still remember, please forgive me. Wife, I'm sorry I forgot your birthday. Really, forgive me. So you're free. It's amazing how many people, they carry around the burden of anger and guilt, like I was saying yesterday. That really is a heavy weight on you. Forgive that so you're free. That's the goal you should have in life. The goal of inner peace, freedom, happiness, joy, a wealth beyond your wildest dreams. You don't need to shoot the arrow anywhere else. Just drop it right where you are. If happiness is being in peace with now and stop the craving, why do people still want to become a monk? Shouldn't they be in peace with what they already have now and doing? Yeah, it'd be great. So don't want to be a monk. Be a monk. That's why when people start, they ordain as monks. Sometimes they ordain for the wrong reasons. You know, they're stupid. When I ordained as a monk, I didn't know what I was doing. It just felt the right thing to do. When I became a monk, I heard that in Thailand you could become a monk just for 1 or 2 years. You can actually disrobe whenever you want. So it was great, because I just finished a relationship with my girlfriend. I had a good job. I was still young. I'm going to go off to Thailand for 1 or 2 years, become enlightened, get that out of the way, then I go back home and get a wife and start working again. That's how stupid I was. And I thought enlightenment was so easy, just like getting another degree. And of course, when I started to realize, after I became a monk, what this really was, it was much better than I expected. Much more. Because it was not becoming a monk outside, but becoming a monk inside. Someone with few possessions, few mental possessions. You may have few things in your bags, but how much do you carry around in your mind? When you have few mental possessions, because I don't possess the future, I don't know what I'm going to talk about next. And I forgot what I talked about yesterday. That's why sometimes I repeat all these stories and jokes. So you just live in the present moment, and who cares? So be light, and that's actually what happiness is. Next question. You said about giving and serving the society. What happens when one gives too much and unconsciously others take advantage of your kindness and generosity? Kindly share your thoughts. Other people have been taking advantage of me for the last 23 years. And I invite you to take advantage of me even more. You can take advantage of me as much as you like. That's what I'm here for, to take advantage of. Isn't that what a mother does to her children? You say, children, whatever you need, doesn't matter when or how, I'm always there to give for you. That's great, like the mother's love for her child is like that, completely selfless. They just want to give. Any time of the day or night, what you need, I'll give you. Isn't that wonderful when you can do that to other people? There are times, though, when to be able to give to other people, I need to give to myself. I have to take time out and rest. So about 2 weeks ago, I forget what I was doing. I was just doing funerals and talks, and I did overdo it. I got a cold. And I felt terrible. And so for the first time, I don't know how many years, every week when I'm in my monastery, I give a talk on a Wednesday night, just to the monks, no one else. Because the monks need a special monk talk. So I usually give a talk to a monk every Wednesday night. But that night, for the first time in I don't know how many years, I cancelled the talk. Because I was sick. I've been overdoing it. Sometimes I know my limits. And so I said, no, I'm not giving any talks. Doesn't matter what happens. If anyone is running away with a 16-year-old, any of you monks, just run away. Don't bother me. And so just 24 hours, I locked the door of my cave and never came out. I rested. I don't know how much I slept that 24 hours. Maybe 12, 13 hours. It was amazing for me. Just my body was just exhausted. But all I did, I gave myself 24 hours and then I was back to normal. So when you really are tired, you've got to say, no, can't do anything. And you give to yourself. And I did that. I gave to myself so I could serve others later. So looking after yourself is not neglecting others. You look after yourself so you can serve others better. So it's not that people are taking advantage of you. That's what you're there for. But so people can take advantage of you better, look after yourself. How can a mum practice my heart is open to you no matter who you are to her kids who are active and playful? That's what kids are like. They are active and playful. They'll be stupid. The boys will fight each other. I was at the Subang Jai yesterday talking to the kids, and one of the first questions I asked them is, how many of you fight your brothers and sisters? And they all put their hand up. Don't you love your brother or sister? Yeah, we love them. Why do you fight then? All you people married, do you love your wife? Do you love your husband? Why do you argue? Don't know. We love them. There's this lady, she was a Chinese Thai, who was married to